All right, everyone, we're going to get started shortly. Quiet down. Everyone cozy. Welcome back from lunch. I hope everyone's feeling satiated. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at Coalesce. My name is Jillian, and I lead the community advocacy team at DBT Labs. I am your host for today's session, Mastering the Art of DBT Package Development. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, Sheri Nguyen, who is an analytics engineer at Fivetran and is here today to share trusted recipes for developing DBT packages. I hope you all brought your aprons. Before we jump into the kitchen, a few recommendations for making the most out of this session. So all of the chat conversation will be taking place in the DBT Slack in the channel Coalesce Mastering the Art. We encourage you to ask questions, make comments, react in the channel, go ham. And after the session, Sheri will jump into the Slack and answer any questions. And with that, let's give it up for Sheri.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Okay. Hi, well, welcome to today's cooking special. We're gonna be talking about mastering the art of DBT package development. And wait, okay, it already has my name on it. So I'm Sheri, lead analytics engineer at Fivetran. I work on the DBT package development team. So I want to start out with getting everybody on the same page about what our Fivetran DBT packages do. So they are data modeling packages used to create reports based on your source data that you have as a result of a Fivetran connector. With these models, we handle the heavy lifting in development to enable you to hit the ground running and go from zero to insight in a fraction of the time. They are a set of data models meant to handle the T in your ELT or ETL processes, so you don't have to. You can add them to your DBT project and get cooking in no time at all. They are created and maintained by the Fivetran DBT package team, which is my team, basically everyone wearing aprons in the front row, and made better by our community of contributors, which I'm happy to say we have over 100 as of today. So now that we've got a good grasp on what our packages are intended to do, let's dive into the recipe for DBT package development. These are the three main components of our development recipe. First, we'll talk about how we gather ingredients for our models and leverage the DBT community for feedback and plan our development roadmaps. Second, we'll talk cooking techniques. Basically, what are our methodologies and development philosophies? Lastly, which is the real fun stuff, we'll review our generalized guidelines for cooking up our models and how we approach organizing and testing them. So the first step in the recipe is gathering ingredients. You can't make something out of nothing, although my mom would beg to differ that women is absolutely magic in the kitchen. But for most of us, when you intend to cook something, we go get the ingredients. And sometimes we'll get substitutes. So for example, maybe you're unsure of a recipe is better with cinnamon sticks or cinnamon powder, so you try a couple different recipes until you figure out which one you like better. This is the stage in our development where we just gather everything that we can. We usually keep a running list of packages up on deck for development and decide which ones to tackle each quarter based on internal feedback and our customer input. We utilize several different avenues to stay in touch with the community, including providing intake for requests and issues on every single one of our GitHub repos. And if you've worked or are familiar with our DBT packages, we have over 80 of them. And we host weekly office hours for customers to have a resource into asking questions and providing feedback for us. We're also very active, if you haven't already noticed, in Tools Fivetran, where we try to answer any question that involves our packages. We also provide a feedback survey for our customers to input as they would like to feedback on all of our packages as we're working on them. We also just launched something pretty exciting, and it's a community forum to offer a place to specifically discuss how we can improve our DBT packages for the future. And for every single package's development lifecycle, We invest an abundant amount of time up front, and we utilize this time to conduct customer use case discovery, as well as perform our own data and platform discovery. And we also take this time to visualize from end to end what our staging models will look like, what our intermediate models will look like, and what our final models will look like. Lastly, we keep up to date with new dbt core/utils updates and releases, just in case we need to make our own packages compatible for our customers. So I wanted to give you a more concrete example of the types of insight we usually get from our customers, as well as the type of insights we gather once we conduct our own deep dive analyses. So this case study is based on a package that's very near and dear to my heart, the ad reporting package, which I hope many of you have heard of. It was released in September, V1 was released in September of this year, and it was our very first V1 version of any of our packages. This package was initially released in March of 2021, so in the time between, we took this time to gather feedback and tried our best to really deliver something worthy of a V1 release. So our customers, they wanted to hit the ground running. No, they wanted to hit the ground sprinting. So we had one big model before this V1 release. It was a giant model called ad reporting, and it had everything an analyst could need for ad reporting. However, the analyst still needed to split up this report into several different grains in order to get the type of reporting they needed. So in V1, we released a new report at every grain that we could derive from the upstream platforms for ad reporting, which turned our one model into 7 models that enabled users to hit the ground running even quicker than before. During discussions with our customers, we also decided that using grain-specific reporting whenever possible provided better and more accurate metrics. So we did that. Another big piece of feedback that we got from our customers was that they were getting a lot of variable setting fatigue. Why do I have to specify the variable settings so many times? And that's a really good point. And so we traversed all models upstream and incorporated configurations so that the customers can now, indeed, set their platform variables only once. Customers also wanted better and more robust testing, as well as more flexibility in choosing which metrics to include in their modeling. And as a result, we incorporated new development standards, which I'll talk about in the next section, so hold on tight. While customer feedback really helped us with defining and overhauling specific features in our package, we decided to go the extra mile while we were at it. We hosted a team hackathon, and during this week-long hackathon, we found that we could provide more concise and efficient documentation. We could use more consistent programmatic approaches across all of our packages, and we can upgrade models to more recently used logic. Lastly, we could also update and add models where new data is now available. While the main focus was ad reporting, we wanted to see how we could leverage our findings here and possibly set new development standards across all of our packages. So for this part of the recipe, I want to dive into our cooking techniques. Specifically, I want to talk about the way we broadly approach development and our general philosophy on development. First and foremost is the thought that we keep in mind for every feature that we incorporate, and that is the idea of the 80-20 rule. Second is how we optimize for maintainability. And third is how do we implement consistent coding practices across all of our packages. With that, let's dive in. So what do we mean when we say build with the 80-20 rule in mind? We can't cover the vast majority of all use cases, but we can create transformations to get customers where they need to be and quicker. We aim to create models that can get customers 80% or a lot of the way there for their reporting needs while providing flexibility and opportunity to customize their own projects in order to achieve the last 20. We always ask ourselves if this is a feature or a table or a field or even an aggregation that can be utilized broadly by our customers, or if it's more geared toward a niche subset of customers. This will decide whether we include any feature in our package. In selecting tables and fields, we base that strategy off of the usage of these tables and fields. We also take into account input from our customer discovery sessions. And lastly, what we as analysts would have ideally for our reports if we were reporting this to our stakeholders. Finally, some of the ways we offer flexibility and customization are with variables in our packages. So these three are an example of the types of variables we typically incorporate in our packages. The first one is what I would call using variables. So this variable enables features for maybe not all customers have this feature enabled, but for the many that do, it's absolutely business critical that they include this type of feature. For customers who want to add any additional metrics that aren't already included natively in our package, we offer the ability to utilize pass-through variables. Lastly, this mostly pertains to roll-up packages, but we offer an enabled feature which allows end users to either enable or disable an upstream platform to their discretion. So this is an example of what those variables look like. The ones on the left are pretty self-explanatory, but the one on the right is our newly upgraded pass-through column logic. So if you've seen any of our packages previously, some of them do have pass-through column logic available, but now with this new logic, you're able to also pass in an alias for your pass-through field, as well as a transformation SQL on them. Optimizing for maintainability. We try our best to optimize for maintainability. We always want to ensure that we're making it the easiest we can for any future contributor to our packages, including ourselves, to contribute. And that means we'll gladly take more lines of code if it's more readable and easier to understand than a complex one-liner. This past year, we made a big effort to revamp our approach on READMEs. We now have READMEs that provide a very quick-to-find requirements sheet, dependency matrix, and callouts so that customers can hit the ground running as soon as they have all basic requirements satisfied. We also opted to documenting all patches habitually in our change logs, so now you can see in our change logs every release that we've ever done. And since we're developing and undoubtedly baking in our own opinionated decisions, we started leveraging the use of decision logs to document our design decisions. And of course, we allow and welcome all discussion that takes place as a result of that. Using consistent coding practices. So we try to use consistent coding practices across all of our packages for cohesion and to create a seamless user experience for our end users. We use utils packages whenever we can. So for example, we use DBT utils and Fivetran utils very, very often. We also really like to leverage the use of macros as necessary. So there are a couple scenarios that we go through as a team every time we're thinking of incorporating some kind of macro. So the first kind of macro that we incorporate is a macro that we think can be reused by the community. In this case, we try to open a PR with DBT whenever we can. We do realize that our team is very unique in this ecosystem, and so macros that are specifically used for package development, we typically will try to include that in our Fivetran utils package. And lastly, there are macros that are like a one-time use case where we just will include that in our packages. And lastly, we also have internal guidelines that we use for our team. We have a style guide for SQL and for YAML. Shout out to BDC and DBT Labs for the inspiration for this one. In the spirit of better scaling, we're working on playbooks to streamline development on our packages. One type of playbook that we're considering is a playbook for different package categories. So for example, if we're looking into creating or working on a financial package, what are the usual considerations that one needs to consider when going through and creating a financial package? Similarly, for ad reporting type packages or e-commerce packages, this would be like a nice playbook for us to access, and for any future contributors that may also be interested in either contributing to a package or creating their own. And lastly, we would like to implement a feature and issue request handling playbook as well. As we evolve as a team, as contributors, as developers, we change the way we approach problems day in and day out. And so we would like to document in a place where we can keep track of our new development approaches. And finally, we're considering hosting these playbooks on GitHub and making it a piece of the contribution resources, and would love to hear if anyone has any other tools or suggestions in our Slack channel. Now we're at the really fun section of this talk, and one where we get a lot of questions from all of our end users, and that is how we think about organization in terms of our staging, intermediate, and final models. So the first question that we get a lot of is, what is the scope of our source packages, and what is the scope of our modeling packages? Second is, what general rules should we follow when organizing staging, intermediate, and final models? And lastly, what kinds of basic and necessary tests should we include in all packages? So almost all of our packages have a source and corresponding modeling package. The only exceptions are our rollup, combination, and utils package. At a very high level, source packages are typically of the form dbt, platform, suffix with source. These models typically cover very basic transformations and are prefixed with stg for staging, while our modeling packages are simply dbt platform. So for example, modeling package is dbt Jira, source package is dbt Jira source. And intermediate models also belong in our modeling package, and they are prefixed with int for intermediate. And so I'll talk more about each one of these models and the transformations we typically think about when we associate with the types of models. So our models fall into one of three categories: staging, intermediate, or final. Our staging models we think of as creating foundational transformations for downstream modeling. Typically, these models only include basic prep work transformations. So for example, this is where we'll do all of our data type casting. This is where we'll rename columns. This is also where we decide on which columns to subset as a part of the source data, as well as which tables to include as a part of this package. The idea is to try to keep as close to the actual source data as possible. Our intermediate models are used typically to abstract any complexity away from the end user. So this is where we do basically the meat of everything, where we have long complex joins, intensive text manipulation, extensive unioning, or ensuring that there is some special case complexity for cross-database compatibility. Lastly, we have our final models, which should allow a quick glance understanding of the final resulting model. This model typically selects from a reference of an upstream model or a variable set in your dbt project. And you should be able to see your aggregates and the grain of the report in one quick glance. So this is an example of what the intermediate and final models would look like in a repo of ours. On the left is a snippet of an intermediate model that we have for ad reporting. It's the account report. We bring all the complexity in this package into the intermediate models and heavily utilize a macro that pieces a query together based on different reporting levels and native naming overrides. On the right is the final model, which you can see refers to the model on the left. And you can quickly see that this final model is expected to have date, day, platform, account ID, and account name, and that's the grain of the report, as well as the aggregated metrics of clicks, impressions, and spend. Lastly, I want to talk about testing. So integration testing is absolutely critical in our package development. It is our bread and butter when it comes to knowing our packages are compatible with the data warehouses that we say they're compatible with. So the databases or data warehouses that we are compatible with are Postgres, Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, and for most of our packages, we do have Spark and Databricks compatibility as well. And our standards for integration tests in terms of releases, we have to pass our integration test before we merge any of our PRs into main. And I'm personally very paranoid, so I will make sure that it also passes before actually releasing the package, just to ensure that it is compatible with all of our data warehouses. Lastly, the specific testing standards that we have for our packages. In our efforts to move toward better and more robust testing, we have started to implement minimum required tests, which include both grain testing and null testing to easily spot data discrepancies in our models. For grain testing, if metrics are aggregated to a certain grain, we must test the most crucial column, if not all columns contributing to that grain, which is my preferred approach, just so that I don't have to make any assumptions on the inherent structure of the data. And typically for grain testing, we'll either utilize unique combination of columns, as pictured here, or we'll use surrogate keys if that surrogate key needs to be used, again, downstream. Next, we also provide null testing for absolutely critical columns in the model. For example, if you have an ad group level report, you should definitely have a non-null ad group ID. And we just test this using the non-null test that's built in. So we've successfully leveraged these two tests to help with debugging our integrations tests and limited inaccuracies in our models. Lastly, which I think is a really neat thing that we've been utilizing, it's not quite a test, but we started using warnings specifically in our Google Ads package, so check it out if you have any time. Essentially in this example, the warning appears when the field source final URLs has more than one element in the array. We wanted to include this warning to make sure the user is aware that we'll only use the first value of the list in order to provide accurate reporting. So the reason why I think this is really neat is that oftentimes, even though we have all these different resources for the community to discuss and give us feedback, this is actually a really nice way to communicate and make sure that the end user and the developer are both on the same page with what a certain implementation or how the implementation is used. As I just wanted to tie everything together with a key takeaway. Basically, package development is a very, very iterative process. We can always improve in more ways than one, and there's no optimal one recipe. You know, you probably know a billion chocolate chip cookie recipes, but you do have a couple of your favorite, and they're probably different. Lastly, I just want to welcome everyone to join our 100 plus contributors in the DBT, or in the Fivetran DBT package code base. Community contributors really help us improve our packages, and we're always very excited and very appreciative when members of the community contribute to our packages. Regardless of your background, we try to provide you with the proper documentation and resources to contribute. So I hope you can find those resources. I know that the GIF is a little blurry, but basically on any of our GitHub repos, if you go to create a new issue, in the Issues tab, there's gonna be a list of resources, which include our Calendly links to come visit us during office hours or to chat with us on Tools Fivetran. But we try to provide as many resources as we can. If you have any questions, please feel free to refer to our Slack, and I want to thank everyone for coming to my talk today.
Thank you so much, Sheri. That was great. Like Sheri said, if you have any questions, jump into the Slack. And if coming up next, if you stick around, Randy from DBT Labs will be in this room talking about what you should not do with DBT. We've also got Emily Shario's talk, Data Led is Dumb, down in room C. Those are the ones that I know of. So thank you, everyone. Sheri. Yes.